In the early 1900s, heroin was a children's cough medicine. In the 50s, amphetamines were sold to housewives as diet pills. We used to drive without seatbelts and drink while we were pregnant and litter indiscriminately, just throw shit out the window. We smoked on airplanes. We would board an enclosed aluminum tube with old people and children and asthmatics and light up a Chesterfield. We had pageants where we paraded women in swimsuits and judged them on their appearance. Oh, wait, we still do that. And that's the point. We're never finished evolving. I hate to break it to you, but no matter how woke you think you are tolerating things right now that will make you cringe in 25 years. In the early 19...
Good morning. It is Tuesday, March the 7th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer, we will have Alex-Epstein, Tucker-Carlson, Fox News, No Free Lunch, and the Medal of Honor. All that and more when I come back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now there's No Free Lunch, 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen.
Your argument is that technological advance should result in a general price decline. But to a classical economist, that's like saying that as modern golfers hit the ball further and further with better equipment, the yardstick should gradually lengthen. When the dollar is kept stable, technological advances are translated into shorter units of time needed to produce goods and services. Jude Wanniski. Prices may come down in a market economy from competitive forces at play, but the advances that we want in a growing economy are not price declines or increases, as much as improved quality of life in the process of producing goods and services. The focus on price makes the unit of measurement the activity instead of the underlying activity. It's highly convoluted. While ample disagreements exist as to how to achieve sound and stable money, it is the disregard for the objective of sound money that has been most disruptive.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, 5 minutes with Fox News.
New York Post columnist Miranda Devine, be here in 1 second, but she writes in her recent column why Democrats are dreading a full Jan 6 reveal. Quote, "There's no sugarcoating happened that day. J6 was shocking and violent in parts. It remains a strain on the nation. But it was not an insurrection or a terrorist attack. It was not the greatest threat to American democracy since the Civil War, as Joe Biden claims. It was not worse than 9/11. Despite the biggest investigation in FBI history, overkill for sure, no one has been charged with insurrection. And there is no evidence of any organized plot to overturn the presidential election." That is pretty darn good. Miranda Devine joins me now, New York Post columnist and Fox News contributor. Miranda, this is great stuff. Personally, for better or worse, I happen to agree with what you're saying here, especially after seeing Tucker Carlson's tapes last night. So, tell us more. Where are you now, and what are you thinking now? Where is this story going to go now, in your judgment?
Well, first of all, Tucker Carlson has part 2 of his revelations from that surveillance footage that hasn't been seen before, and included in that, I think he's interviewing a former quite high-level Capitol Police officer who he's described as a whistleblower. So I think that will be interesting. And the fact that Chuck Schumer has gone down to the Senate floor today and just hyperventilated about, the destruction to democracy and saying that Tucker Carlson is sliming the truth. What a hide after what the Democrats have done for the last 2.5 years. I do think it's unfortunate for Republicans that Mitch McConnell, the Senate leader, has now come out and basically backed the Democrats. That's inexplicable unless... and now this is what my hunch is that he's trying to cover up for his own culpability that day for going along with Nancy Pelosi's refusal to give the Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund the National Guard backup that he was begging for days beforehand, but particularly on that day as things were getting more and more frantic. The Capitol Police were left high and dry, outnumbered, like lambs to the slaughter, and that was because Nancy Pelosi, and I had always thought, Mitch McConnell really wasn't part of this, but maybe he is. He certainly, I don't know why he's given this needless gift to the Democrats.
The thing is, though, what you see with great clarity, look, you've been reporting this, but what you see with Tucker's tapes, I watched them last night, I'm going to watch them again tonight, of course I will. First of all, this guy... Chansey, the shaman, whatever, he was not a mad dog going around killing people. It was almost like he was being escorted by the cops for a tour of the Capitol. And the other thing that's been written about and Tucker's tapes cover last night is the Capitol Hill police officer, Sicknick, was not killed in this by somebody, by a terrorist or he had a heart attack or a stroke later or the day later. I'm not sure what all the facts are. And these are so many of the sort of headlines that Democrats used on the J6 committee, and some of these Republicans went along with it, that were just completely false. And it's like you write. The reason I like your column so much, Miranda, is this was not a great day for America. I get that, okay? Things happen we wish didn't happen. But it was not an insurrection. It was not a terrorist act. It was not the worst day in America. It was not as bad as the Civil War, 9/11. That's, your perspective just appeals to me so much here.
Yes, thanks. And look, I think the real damage to the United States, and I'm just shocked that a president would do this to his own country just for base political purposes. The damage to the United States reputation around the world, I know from, friends in Australia and in England, that they see January 6th through the prism of 2 years of Democrat lies. It's very hard once that narrative has solidified in the minds of people, and I think a lot of Americans as well, to actually dislodge it with the truth. And that's why I think there's been so much pushback against Tucker Carlson, and good on Kevin McCarthy for actually making this footage available. Tucker Carlson is just the beginning. There is going to be a lot more footage coming out over time. The Democrats no longer have control of this story.
And good on Tucker Carlson. And good on Miranda.
Absolutely.
Divine. Good on Miranda, too. Put that.
And that was Fox News and Larry Kudlow about the January 6th so-called insurrection. So, back in a minute. Thank you. And now, about 2 minutes of Alex-Epstein.
So I would put all of these in the same category if you're talking about being protected from heat, being protected from cold. But climate-related disaster deaths include things like hurricanes, not really tsunamis because not really climate-related in the same way.
That's correct.
But so you take storms, floods, all of these things, wildfires. Deaths from all of these are way, way down. I've documented this really extensively in Chapter 7 of Fossil Future. And if people just go to energytalkingpoints.com, they can also see all this info for free. And so if you think about it logically, it makes total sense. Like, Charlie, just think about it. Would you rather live in the climate of 100 years ago or today? I mean, isn't it obvious that we'd all rather live today? And yet we think about today's climate as uniquely dangerous. But what we find when we realize how safe we are from climate is that the real variable that counts in terms of safety from climate is how good are you at mastering climate. Above all, how good are you at neutralizing climate danger? For example, I mentioned earlier, drought. How good are you at irrigating to avoid drought? And how good are you at transporting crops from areas that don't have drought to areas that have drought? We've driven drought-related deaths down by over 99%. Drought routinely killed millions of people a year just 100 years ago, and they don't anymore. And it's fossil fuels that are driving this because they're powering the machines that irrigate, the crop transport machines, et cetera. And so if you realize how good we are at mastering climate with fossil fuels, this is so important because it means that any future changes, we can use the same mastery abilities, which means that for future changes to be a big problem, they would have to be a total difference in kind for anything we've experienced in the last 100 plus years where we've already been emitting CO2. So if we've already been emitting CO2 and we're safer than ever from climate, why do people think it's going to be the apocalypse emitting more CO2? It has to be, I think, a religious faith thing. It's not a science.
Well, and I think, yeah.
And that was Alex Epstein, about 2 minutes of about energy. And I wanted to say again, remember that the quickest argument here is if somebody comes off with weird weather or something of that nature, you can just say that's right, but not because of carbon dioxide. Also, if you're a Democrat, you really need to consider voting Republican, becoming a Republican, because we are the true party of the environment. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of Donald Trump on foreign policy.
Joe Biden claims to support American manufacturing, but in reality, he's pushing the same pro-China globalist agenda that ripped the industrial heart out of our country. It ripped us apart. Biden and the globalists support raising taxes on American production. They support more crippling regulations killing American jobs. They support skyrocketing domestic energy costs. And they support massive anti-American multinational agreements that send our wealth and factories overseas. Very simply, the Biden agenda taxes America to build up China. China is the big beneficiary. We cannot let that happen. And just a couple of years ago, it wasn't happening. China paid to the United States hundreds of billions of dollars, and no other president got 10 cents, legitimately 10 cents from China. My agenda will tax China to build up America. The heart of my vision is a sweeping pro-American overhaul of our tax and trade policy to move from the Biden system that punishes domestic producers and rewards outsourcers to a system that rewards domestic production and taxes foreign companies and those who export American jobs. They will be rewarded and rewarded greatly, and our country will benefit. To achieve this goal, we will phase in a system of universal baseline tariffs on most foreign products. On top of this, higher tariffs will increase incrementally depending on how much individual foreign countries devalue their currency. They devalue their currency to take advantage of the United States, and they subsidize their industries or otherwise engage in trade cheating and abuse. And they do it now like never before, and we had it largely stopped, and it was going to be stopped completely within less than a year. As tariffs on foreign producers go up, taxes on American producers will go down and go down very substantially, and that means a lot of jobs coming in. Not only will this system end our gaping trade deficits, and they are massive right now, and bring back millions of American jobs, it will also bring trillions and trillions of dollars pouring into the United States Treasury from foreign countries and allow us to invest that money in American workers, American families, and American communities. This plan will be the linchpin of a new strategic national manufacturing initiative that builds on my historic success in ending NAFTA which was a tremendous thing, a tremendous achievement. Nobody thought it could be done. And we did USMCA, US, Mexico, Canada, and it was an incredible thing. But we're also going to end other unfair trade deals, and we'll end them quickly. In addition, as a matter of both economic and national security, I will implement a bold series of reforms to completely eliminate dependence on China in all critical areas. We will revoke China's most favored nation trade status and adopt a 4-year plan to phase out all Chinese imports of essential goods, everything from electronics to steel to pharmaceuticals. This will include strong protections to ensure China cannot circumvent restrictions by passing goods through conduit countries that don't make a product, but all of a sudden they're selling a lot of product. It comes right through China, right out of China, and right into our country. We will also adopt new rules to stop U.S. companies from pouring investments into China and to stop China from buying up America, allowing all of those investments that clearly serve American interests. We're not going to allow bad things to happen to our country anymore, and we will eliminate federal contracts for any company that outsources to China. Biden will never get the job done. He is weak on China because the corrupt Biden family has received millions and millions of dollars from entities tied to the Chinese Communist Party. Everybody knows that. They try and hide it, and the fake news doesn't want to talk about it. Biden's pro-China economic program puts America last, and it's killing our country. My cutting-edge trade agenda will revitalize our economy by once again putting America first. And by the way, we'll get along very well with China. And you know what the reason is? They'll respect us again like they did just 2 years ago. We will quickly become a manufacturing powerhouse like the world has never seen before. Thank you very much.
And that was Donald Trump on Biden and the globalists. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of Tucker-Carlson, about 10 minutes, about the January 6th committee.
The real crime, they will tell you again and again, is not what happened on Election Day 2020. The real crime is what happened 2 months later on January 6th, when Donald Trump led an insurrection against the duly elected American government. To prove that claim and to divert attention from the details of the presidential election itself, Democrats in Congress impaneled what they called the House Select Committee on the January 6th attack. The point of that committee was to prevent Donald Trump from running for president again. In December of last year, committee members voted unanimously to refer Trump to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution. Mission accomplished. But what the committee did not do was explain what happened inside the Capitol on January 6th. 3 weeks ago, thanks to the new Republican Speaker's office, we gained access to thousands of hours of surveillance video that help answer that question. The January 6th committee had access to this very same tape and watched much of it. But as we're about to show you, committee members lied about what they saw and then hid the evidence from the public as well as from January 6th criminal defendants and their lawyers. That is unforgivable. Whatever you think of Speaker Kevin McCarthy, he rectified that crime, and we are grateful that he did. Before we show you the tape, a few words on the process. Our producers had unfettered access to the Capitol surveillance video. Neither the Speaker's office nor our bosses at Fox News interfered in any way with our investigation. Of the 40,000 or so hours of tape, most of it turned out to be irrelevant. Static shots of empty rooms, in some cases far from the Capitol itself. To find relevant videotape, our producers were given use of Capitol computers with advanced mapping software. That made it easy to find what we were looking for. What we didn't have was access to facial recognition software, and that was significant. For more than 2 years, we have wondered why some in the crowd that day who seemed to be inciting violence were never indicted for it. We assumed these were federal agents of some sort. We still assume that. And in fact, there were many examples of behavior we saw in those tapes that didn't seem to make sense. Men in civilian clothes holding doors open for protesters, escorting others through the Capitol, etc. We would love to know who these people were. But as of tonight, we don't know. And because we don't know, we're not going to put their faces on the screen and suggest they were federal agents. That would be irresponsible. So there were many mysteries we could not solve. Among them, unfortunately, is the shooting of Ashley Babbitt. From the evidence we have, the publicly available evidence, it seems clear that Babbitt was murdered by a Capitol Hill police officer called Michael Byrd. Ashley Babbitt was unarmed. She was shorter in stature than average. She posed no conceivable threat to anyone. But beyond that, we can only speculate about what happened. There were no security cameras near the speaker's lobby where Ashley Babbitt was killed. And one more thing. Virtually no one in Washington, Republican or Democrat, certainly not in the news media, wanted to see this tape released tonight. That's why it's remained hidden for more than 2 years. In recent weeks, the usual hyenas in Congress and on cable news have been howling about we are putting lives at risk by showing this tape to the public. Given that these are the very same people who support open borders and defunding the police, it is hard to take their complaints seriously. But we do take security seriously. So before airing any of this video, we checked first with the Capitol Police. We're happy to say their reservations were minor, and for the most part, they were reasonable. In the end, the only change that we made was in blurring the details of a single interior door in the Capitol building. You're unlikely even to notice it when we show you, and we are confident it does not affect our reporting. With that, here's the video. It doesn't answer every question from January 6th, far from it. But it does prove beyond doubt that Democrats in Congress, assisted by Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, lied about what happened that day. They are liars. That is conclusive. And that fact should prevent them from ever being taken seriously again. We're going to begin tonight with footage that shows you what was actually happening inside the Capitol. The footage does not show an insurrection or a riot in progress. Instead, it shows police escorting protesters through the building, including the now infamous QAnon shaman. Watch. These are the pictures you've seen of January 6th. They're familiar because they've been playing on a loop on every media outlet in America for the last 2 years. There's a reason for that. But it turns out there's quite a bit of video you haven't seen. And that video tells a very different story about what happened on January 6th. More than 40,000 hours of surveillance footage from in and around the Capitol have been withheld from the public. And once you see the video, you'll understand why. Taken as a whole, the video record does not support the claim that January 6th was an insurrection. In fact, it demolishes that claim. And that's exactly why the Democratic Party and its allies in the media prevented you from seeing it. By controlling the images you were allowed to view from January 6th, they controlled how the public understood that day. They could lie about what happened, and you would never know the difference. Those lies had a purpose. They created a pretext for a federal crackdown on opponents of the Uniparty in Washington.
Our office wanted to ensure that there was shock and awe, that we could charge as many people as possible.
The first thing you notice from viewing the full video record of January 6th is just how many people entered the Capitol building that day. Hundreds and hundreds of people, possibly thousands, over the course of about 2 hours. The crowd was enormous. A small percentage of them were hooligans. They committed vandalism. You've seen their pictures again and again. But the overwhelming majority weren't. They were peaceful. They were orderly and meek. These were not insurrectionists. They were sightseers. Footage from inside the Capitol overturns the story you've heard about January 6th. Protesters queue up in neat little lines. They give each other tours outside the Speaker's office. They take cheerful selfies and they smile. They're not destroying the Capitol. They obviously revere the Capitol. They're there because they believe the election was stolen from them. They believe in the system. Here's the man you've heard referred to as the QAnon shaman outside the Senate chamber. These are not rioters. These are people who wandered over from a political rally.
We will not let them silence your voices.
After the rally, they walked down Pennsylvania Avenue, where organizers had secured a federal permit to hold a legal rally on the grounds of the Capitol.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
Once at the Capitol building, things began to get chaotic. Capitol police officers fired tear gas into the crowd. A few at the front of the herd broke windows. Someone opened the doors, and many hundreds of others just walked in.
They're going to make that the story.
Of course, they did make it the story. And at the center of it, the single most famous person arrested that day was a Navy veteran from Arizona called Jacob Chansley, often referred to as the QAnon shaman.
The so-called QAnon shaman.
QAnon shaman.
Someone named Q Shaman.
Jacob Chansley became the face of January 6th, a dangerous conspiracy theorist dressed in outlandish costume who led the violent insurrection to overthrow American democracy. For these crimes, Chansley was sentenced to nearly 4 years in prison, far more time than many violent criminals now receive. What did Jacob Chansley do to receive this punishment? To this day, there is dispute over how Chansley got into the Capitol building. But according to our review of the internal surveillance video, it is very clear what happened once he got inside. Virtually every moment of his time inside the Capitol was caught on tape. The tapes show that Capitol Police never stopped Jacob Chansley. They helped him. They acted as his tour guides. Here's video of Chansley in the Senate chamber. Capitol Police officers take him to multiple entrances and even try to open locked doors for him. We counted at least 9 officers who were within touching distance of unarmed Jacob Chansley. Not one of them even tried to slow him down. Chansley understood that Capitol Police were his allies. Video shows him giving thanks for them in a prayer on the floor of the Senate. Watch.
Thank you, Heavenly Father, for giving the inspiration needed to these police officers to allow us into the building.
Contrast the reality of what Jacob Chansley did in the Capitol building on January 6th, the indisputable facts recorded on video, some of which has never before been seen, with the depiction of Jacob Chansley that you've seen in the media for more than 2 years. He's a terrorist, they said. He should be killed.
Shoot him. Shoot him. Like, if you burst into the United States, if he was dressed like Bin Laden, would you have shot him?
Shoot him. Shoot him. It makes you wonder, who are the violent extremists here? Not Jacob Chansley. And the video proves that. But you would never have known from the media coverage.
The people sitting in the chairs need to be sitting in a jail cell.
Chansley is in a jail cell. He's been there for months. If he was in fact committing such a grave crime, why didn't the officers who were standing right next to him place him under arrest? Until now, no one could even prove that even happened. But it did. The real crime, they will tell you again and again, is not what happened on Election Day 2020. The real crime is what happened 2 months later on January 6th, when Donald Trump led an insurrection against the duly elected American government. To prove that claim and to divert attention from the details of the presidential election itself, Democrats in Congress impaneled what they called the House Select Committee on the January 6th attack.
And that was Tucker-Carlson about the January 6th committee. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, about 20 minutes of the Medal of Honor for Sergeant First Class Leroy Arthur Petrie.
Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, you who have given us this good land and its founding truth for our American heritage, we ask your presence as we gather to recognize a man who has gone above and beyond the call of duty in defense of that heritage. In your providence, Sergeant First Class Leroy Petrie, valor and sacrifice saved the lives of his men and fellow Rangers of that trying day in Afghanistan. By your grace, we know that he continues to live today according to those same values. Out of such heroes, you have woven the tapestry of this great nation. Pray that you may enable each of us as Americans to likewise live lives of valor and sacrifice every day as you continue weaving the tapestry of America. We celebrate with Sergeant First Class Petrie's wife, mother, father, grandparents, his brothers, and his children. Also remember his grandfather, Leo, celebrates with us today in a very special way. We're grateful for all the people and events you have used to mold this man who stands before us this day. We're grateful, too, for the Rangers, our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen, given their lives in this long conflict. Give your grace and strength to their families and friends as they live with the loss of their loved ones and comrades. And now may your presence be with us in this hour. May your guiding grace be upon our national leadership. Grant to all in our military, especially those who serve today in harm's way, the strength and wisdom that come only from you. You be honored in every endeavor to which you call America and her citizens. And finally, may your favor be upon Sergeant First Class Petrie and his family. President Calvin Coolidge once wrote, "A nation that forgets its defenders itself will be forgotten." Grant that we as a nation hold him and those like him who have given so much in our common defense unforgotten. This we come before you, and we pray in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain Rutherford. Please be seated. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the White House as we present our nation's highest military decoration, the Medal of Honor, to an extraordinary American soldier, Sergeant First Class Leroy Petrie. This is a historic occasion. Last fall, I was privileged to present the Medal of Honor to Staff Sergeant Salvatore Giunta for his heroism in Afghanistan, and Sal joins us this afternoon. Where's Sal? Good to see you. So today is only the second time during the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, indeed only the second time since Vietnam, that a recipient of the Medal of Honor from an ongoing conflict has been able to accept this medal in person. And having just spent some time with Leroy, his lovely wife Ashley, their wonderful children in the Oval Office, then had a chance to see the entire Petrie family here, I have to say, this could not be happening to a nicer guy or a more inspiring family. Leroy, the Medal of Honor reflects the deepest gratitude of our entire nation. So we're joined by members of Congress, Vice President Biden, leaders from across my administration, including Deputy Secretary of Defense Bill Lynn, and leaders from across our armed forces, including the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Jim Haas Cartwright, Army Secretary John McHugh, and Army Chief of Staff General Marty Dempsey. We're honored to welcome more than 100 of Leroy's family and friends, many from his home state of New Mexico, as well as his fellow Rangers from the legendary Delta Company, 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. And as always, we are humbled by the presence of members of the Medal of Honor Society. Today, we honor a singular act of gallantry. Yet as we near the 10th anniversary of the attacks that thrust our nation into war, this is also an occasion to pay tribute to a soldier and a generation that has borne the burden of our security during a hard decade of sacrifice. I want to take you back to the circumstances that led to this day. It's May 26th, 2008. In the remote east of Afghanistan, near the mountainous border of Pakistan, helicopters carrying dozens of elite Army Rangers race over the rugged landscape. And their target is an insurgent compound. The mission is high risk. It's broad daylight. The insurgents are heavily armed. But it's considered a risk worth taking because intelligence indicates that a top Al-Qaeda commander is in that compound. Soon, the helicopters touch down, and our Rangers immediately come under fire. Within minutes, Leroy, then a staff sergeant, and another soldier are pushing ahead into a courtyard surrounded by high mud walls. And that's when the enemy opens up with their AK-47s. Leroy is hit in both legs. He's bleeding badly, but he summons the strength to lead the other Ranger to cover behind a chicken coop. He radios for support. He hurls a grenade at the enemy, giving cover to a third Ranger who rushes to their aid. An enemy grenade explodes nearby, wounding Leroy's 2 comrades. And then a second grenade lands, this time only a few feet away. Now, every human impulse would tell someone to turn away. Every soldier is trained to seek cover. That's what Sergeant Leroy Petrie could have done. Instead, this wounded Ranger, this 28-year-old man with his whole life ahead of him, this husband and father of 4, did something extraordinary. He lunged forward toward the live grenade. He picked it up. He cocked his arm to throw it back. And what compels such courage? What leads a person to risk everything so that others might live? And for answers, we don't need to look far. The roots of Leroy's valor are all around us. We see it in the sense of duty instilled by his family, who joins us today. His father, Larry, his mother, Lorella, and his 4 brothers. Growing up, the walls of their home were hung with pictures of grandfathers and uncles in uniform, leading a young Leroy to believe, that's my calling too. We see it in the compassion of a high school student who overcame his own struggles to mentor younger kids, to give them a chance. We see it in the loyalty of an Army Ranger who lives by a creed, never shall I fail my comrades. Or as Leroy puts it, these are my brothers, family, just like my wife and kids, and you protect the ones you love. And that's what he did that day, when he picked up that grenade and threw it back, just as it exploded. With that selfless act, Leroy saved his 2 Ranger brothers, and they are with us today. This valor came with a price. The force of the blast took Leroy's right hand. Shrapnel riddled his body. Said one of his teammates, I had never seen someone hurt so bad. So even his fellow Rangers were amazed at what Leroy did next. Despite his grievous wounds, he remained calm. He actually put on his own tourniquet. And he continued to lead, directing his team, giving orders, even telling the medics how to treat his wounds. When the fight was won, as he lay in a stretcher being loaded onto a helicopter, one of his teammates came up to shake the hand that Leroy had left. That was the first time I shook the hand of someone who I considered to be a true American hero, that Ranger said. Leroy Petrie showed that true heroes still exist and that they're closer than you think. That Ranger's right. Our heroes are all around us. They're the millions of Americans in uniform who have served these past 10 years. Many, like Leroy, deploying tour after tour, year after year. On the morning of 9/11, Leroy was training to be a Ranger, and as his instructor got the terrible news, they told Leroy and his class, keep training, you might be going to war. Within months, Leroy was in Afghanistan for the first of 7 deployments since 9/11. Leroy speaks proudly of the progress our troops have made. Afghan communities now free from the terror of the Taliban and Afghan forces that are taking more responsibility for their security. And he carries with him the memories of Americans who have made the ultimate sacrifice to make this progress possible. Earlier in the Oval Office, Leroy gave me the extraordinary privilege of showing me the small plaque that is bolted to his prosthetic arm. On it are the names of the fallen Rangers from the 75th Regiment. They are quite literally part of him, just as they will always be part of America. Now, one of those names is of the Ranger who did not come back from the raid that day, Specialist Christopher Gathercole. Christopher's brother and sister and grandmother are here with us today. I would ask that they stand briefly so that we can show our gratitude for their family's profound sacrifice. Our heroes are all around us. They're the force behind the force. Military spouses like Ashley, who during Leroy's many deployments, during missed birthdays and holidays, has kept this family army strong. So we're grateful to you, Ashley, and for all the military spouses who are here. Their military children, like Brittany and Austin, Reagan and 7-year-old Landon, who at the end of a long day is there to gently rub his dad's injured arm. And so I want to make sure that we acknowledge these extraordinary children as well. Our heroes are all around us. There are men and women in uniform who, through a decade of war, have earned their place among the greatest of generations. And during World War II, on D-Day, it was the Rangers of D Company who famously scaled the cliffs of Pont du Hoc. After 9/11, we learned again, Rangers lead the way. They were some of the first boots on the ground in Afghanistan. They have been deployed continuously ever since. Today we can see our progress in this war and our success against al-Qaeda, and we're beginning to bring our troops home from Afghanistan this summer. Understand there will be more fighting and more sacrifices in the months and years to come, but I am confident that because of the service of men and women like Leroy, we will be able to say of this generation what President Reagan once said of those Rangers who took the cliffs on D-Day. These are the heroes who helped end a war. I would ask all of our Rangers, members of the 9/11 generation, to stand and accept the thanks of a grateful nation. Finally, the service of Leroy Petrie speaks to the very essence of America. That spirit that says no matter how hard the journey, no matter how steep the climb, we don't quit. We don't give up. Leroy lost a hand, and those wounds in his legs sometimes make it hard for him to stand. But he pushes on and even joined his fellow Rangers for a grueling 20-mile march. He could have focused only on his own recovery, but today he helps care for other wounded warriors, inspiring them with his example. Given his wounds, he could have retired from the Army with honor, but he chose to re-enlist indefinitely. And this past year, he returned to Afghanistan, his 8th deployment, back with his Ranger brothers on another mission to keep our country safe. This is the stuff of which heroes are made. This is the strength, the devotion that makes our troops the pride of every American. And this is the reason that, like a soldier named Leroy Petrie, America doesn't simply endure. We emerge from our trials stronger, more confident, with our eyes fixed on the future. Our heroes are all around us. and as we prepare for the reading of the citation, please join me in saluting one of those heroes, Leroy Petrie.
The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, March 3rd, 1863, has awarded in the name of Congress the Medal of Honor to Staff Sergeant Leroy A. Petrie, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Leroy A. Petrie distinguished himself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty in action with an armed enemy in the vicinity of Paktia Province, Afghanistan, on May 26, 2008. As a weapons squad leader with Delta Company, 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, Staff Sergeant Petrie moved to clear the courtyard of a house that potentially contained high-value combatants. While crossing the courtyard, Staff Sergeant Petrie and another Ranger were engaged and wounded by automatic weapons fire from enemy fighters. Still under enemy fire and wounded in both legs, Staff Sergeant Petrie led the other Ranger to cover. He then reported the situation and engaged the enemy with a hand grenade, providing suppression as another Ranger moved to his position. The enemy quickly responded by maneuvering closer and throwing grenades. The first grenade explosion knocked his two fellow Rangers to the ground and wounded both with shrapnel. A second grenade then landed only a few feet away from them. Instantly realizing the danger, Staff Sergeant Petrie, unhesitatingly and with complete disregard for his safety, deliberately and selflessly moved forward, picked up the grenade, and in the effort to clear the immediate threat, threw the grenade away from his fellow Rangers. As he was releasing the grenade, it detonated, amputating his right hand at the wrist and further injuring him with multiple shrapnel wounds. Although picking up and throwing the live grenade grievously wounded Staff Sergeant Petrie, his gallant act undeniably saved his fellow Rangers from being severely wounded or killed. Despite the severity of his wounds, Staff Sergeant Petrie continued to maintain the presence of mind to place a tourniquet on his right wrist before communicating the situation by radio in order to coordinate support for himself and his fellow wounded Rangers. Staff Sergeant Petrie's extraordinary heroism and devotion to duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, 75th Ranger Regiment, and the United States Army.
And that was former President Barack Obama awarding the Medal of Honor to Sergeant First Class Leroy Arthur Petrie. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. So I'm reminding you that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.